Hi, I'm Siwapili Rose Amador LeBeau, and this is Native Voice TV. Welcome to the show. You know, recently I attended the American Indian Heritage Celebration here in San Jose, California, and there were a variety of different tribes there dancing and performing, and happened to see one group there, the Southern Winds Dance Group. They're fantastic, and we have them with us on the show today. So I'd like to welcome Shirley Giannini and John Silva. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
And I really enjoyed your dancing at the not the fairgrounds, but at the school. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So-
Gunishish in our language. Gunishish.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Now, can you tell me about your tribe?
Yeah, we are from Southeast Alaska. We are from, our clan is the Tontaquan Tequadi Cat Hitch people, Cot Hitch, and we come from Tongass Island, which is an island maybe a couple miles south of Ketchikan. And so we are from, there are 3 houses on the island, and we are from people from a house. So we are from the first house, and then there's 2 other houses after that. And that's where we originated from Tongass Island.
Okay, so when you say there were 3 houses, just 3 houses on the whole island?
So what would happen is these longhouses were roughly about 50 feet long by 25, 30 feet wide. And so your whole family lived in the house. So you follow your mother's clan.
Okay.
So when you're born, as my mom was, she was a bear.
Okay.
So she lived in the bear house. And so they lived in the first bear house. So that's where they were at, her great-grandmother. And her great-grandmother's name was Alice Brown. And so she lived in the first longhouse in Tongass. So then there were other houses, and then there were raven houses, and that's our opposite side. So when I say there were 3 houses, there were 3 bear houses, plus the raven houses in Village Island, which is another island, another small island. And so as they came into contact with the Europeans, the Russians, there was a trading post built there, a fort, Fort Tongass. And so that's where they traded furs and things like that there at Fort Tongass when the Russians came. But then later on, as the United States came, then they pushed us out and pushed us into Ketchikan. And then we were there. And then my grandfather on our Raven side of our family, he was in a house called the Bubble House, which sat, if you were to go through Ketchikan, there's a bridge that goes across. The house sat right there at the edge of the bridge, which now the federal building sits there today. So that's how my family, and that's how I'm connected to the Tequadi people, is through Alice Brown. And Alice Brown was if you go back, Alice Brown was the last tattooed princess for our clan. She had bears on her wrists, on her forearms. There were 2 of them. And then she had, as she got older, they tattooed on her here. And so she was our real last Mama clan. And when you talk Mama clan, that's the head of the clan on the female side. And then male, they're the house speaker. And so that's our link to the clan through my great-great-grandmother. And then it was passed down to my grandmother, but in around 1949, she left Ketchikan and came down to California. And my mom and her youngest sister were raised here.
I see.
So they were born up there until they were around 12, 13 years old, and then they moved down here into California. Their oldest sister was pregnant, having her first child, so they came down to help her, and then they never went back. So my mom pretty much grew up down here.
And Shirley, your family, how did they arrive here?
Our family, well, we were here because my mother came down from Alaska, and then she started her family here. So my brother and I have been down here all our life.
But your grandparents?
My grandmother lived in a town called Isleton down on the Delta, and she was the one that came from Alaska to be with her daughter.
I see.
And pretty much we were down here the whole time, and then we traveled back and forth to Alaska to be a part of our culture.
Do you have any family there? Either of you still there?
Yeah.
So what is life like there?
It's definitely different. I mean, due to the weather. I mean, it goes from kind of nice and then goes to real cold. They get snow, but more rain. 162 inches in around the Ketchikan area of rain.
Wow.
And so they are within damp weather, but they do get snow, and it does stay up on the mountains, but it's snow that comes in a couple of days, it's gone. So, but it was cannery life there. So when my grandmother was there was canneries. And so her husband, which were Hawaiian, because my grandfather came from Maui and then worked in the canneries, met my grandmother, they got married, had 6 kids, and the rest is history. Here I am. And so we're on my mom's side, my mother was half Tlingit and then half Hawaiian, which was pretty much a common thing. And there was a lot of Hawaiians up there because of the canneries.
Really?
Yeah, there were more than you'll know. A lot of Haida Hawaiians, a lot of Simpson Hawaiians. So there were the Hawaiian heritage up there only because of the work. It was a lot of work from the 40s until about the mid 80s, and then the canneries disappeared because they processed everything out on the ship. So there was really kind of no use for a cannery anymore.
So is there fishing or canoeing in your culture, or what?
And so, in our culture, as far as fishing and canoeing, yes, very big. Salmon was the big thing, so they would fish for a lot of salmon to put away. They learned how to dry it in a way that it could stay for a long time. And so canoeing was a very big thing for us. It's a very funny thing. When I was a kid, we would watch TV, and my grandmother always said we were native from up in Alaska. So when you're a kid growing up here in the lower 48, you think horses, and that's how you traveled around, but not living up there, it was totally the opposite. So how they got around, they're water people. So that's all they did was canoe. And so they canoed and traded up and down the West Coast for years. Years of 10,000 years going back, they found canoes that are dated back 500-600 years, and they've done some stuff. So there's a potato, Alaskan potato, which doesn't grow round. It's a longer version of it, not very big, and they know now that came from South America. They know that, and so it tells us that they've traded up and down, and there is a little piece of our history is in Thailand. There's a longhouse with 2 poles, and the story is they're not sure how it got there or why, but they know that it was people from somewhere else that put it there. When you look at it, it looks like the one at the Saxman Park. It's the same design, same type of poles, just different color paint. So, they say Christopher Columbus was the first to come over, and I can argue with him. We've been back and forth many times, over and over and over again. So, canoeing and fishing were a big way of life to live. And so, in our culture, we believe that we were animals. So we were the bears. So we transmated into humans. And so a lot of it came from the fish itself. So when it comes out of the sea, they're all silver. But when they hit when they're going upstream and they hit the fresh water, they start to transform. And then they turn into king salmons, rainbows, whatever they turn into. So some of our culture of that came through that too. So yeah, salmon are a very, very big, huge part in our life.
Now, Shirley, both of you are wearing very colorful regalia. Can you tell me what you're wearing?
Yes, this is my native blanket, and on the back is the clan that I'm with. I have a bear on the back. I am a bear through my mother, because we follow our mother's side. So my children would wear the bear because they follow me. Okay. But my son, his children are ravens. So they wear a raven on the back of theirs because they follow their mother. And so she would be the opposite of what I am, the bear.
Oh, okay.
So traditionally it's eagle, raven, and then I come from the bear house. So that's why I wear the bear on the back. And then this little piece right here is bear fur.
Okay. And do all of the blankets have buttons? And what do they represent?
Well, it's awful because you know when you're young, you're supposed to listen. And so I listened, but I didn't hear. So I'm not really sure about the buttons. Do you know about the buttons?
So what happened to us is our first introduction to Europeans were Russian. So if you look at what we're wearing, if you were to pull up a Russian soldier's uniform, the rest is history.
Okay.
So our people, because of the dampness, they wore fur, and the majority of their clothing were cedar. So they were done like this. So they wore cedar clothing because of the rain. The cedar would keep it off. And then they would wear fur to keep warm. But the majority of their clothing was cedar. So they wore cedar hats, cedar tunics. But when we came in encounter with the Russians in the 1700s, that was our first introduction to material. So when the Russian Orthodox came, the soldiers, that's what we seen. So the buttons are the shiny buttons on their uniform. And so they use the buttons so when you look at a uniform of a Russian soldier back in the 1800s, you're pretty much going to see the same coloring of the clinkets, black and red. And so they use the buttons to outline everything because that's how the soldiers' uniforms.
Okay.
And in the priest, they had outline. So that's where the buttons came for. When we wore our regalia like we wear it today, is more from it's European and more Russian because they brought the felt. And the Pendleton blankets, and the Pendleton blankets are very big in our culture because of that. They're the first blankets we were introduced to. And so that's where these things, we beat it all the time, like most natives, that abalone shells, shiny rocks, things in those nature, coral, whatever they could get their hands on in. Because when we dance, we're a little bit different in that we don't go around in a circle, we stay lined up. And back in the days of the 1700s, 1800s, and again, sometimes you have to be careful when you say you want to go back in time, because then it leaves the women out in our culture, because it was one man drumming, singing the songs, and all the men danced. And so that's how we were. And nowadays, if it wasn't for the women, we probably would have lost our dancing, because there was a time period of there where it wasn't really cool to be native. So a lot of men kind of backed out And so the women kept the dancing going, and God bless them.
Kept the culture alive.
Kept culture alive. And so now it's starting to come back where the older men and the middle-aged men are starting to dance. And so we dance differently, and we line up, and you know, there was a fire, we didn't go around, so we just stayed in front of the fire. But what they did is they started to realize that to put more buttons and get more jazzier with their regalia, and then the headpieces became, you know, as such. And as most people know, they use a lot of mask. And so today, with the Tlinkits, don't use it so much. The Haidas and the Tsimshians use it quite a bit, and a lot of the natives in Canada use masks. On my cousin's side, the Quiute people, they use three-dimensional masks, where it's a raven, and then it opens up, it's a sun, or a human's face. We used to, but what happened is when the Europeans came, they changed our culture, our religion, so a lot of it was taken wherever it went. And so we don't have the masks that we used to do because they're gone. And so that's what happened to that. But the buttons and everything came more from the Europeans.
Interesting. Now, Shirley, can you tell me about the Southern Winds Dance Group?
Southern Winds Dance Group. It was started about 2 years ago. My brother decided that he wanted to do something and got this dance group going. And there's probably about, probably 30 dance members. And we try to meet once a month down in Isleton where we live and have a practice, and then learn songs and stuff. And then my daughter, who is our drum leader, she has made a couple of her own songs, because you know the youth want to have a little input into it, which is good.
Yes.
That is very good. And we have, it's Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian, and it's mainly family, but then we do have others from around the area, like from here in the, you know, the Bay, and then up in Redding and Roseville, and they all come out and once a month and try to practice with us and everything. And we have youth in there, but not as much as we'd like to, because so many of them get to an age where they, it's embarrassing for them. Nobody around here is doing that, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, but it is pretty strong, and we've gone to Celebration this past year, which was in Juneau, Alaska, and we did very well up there. And then we've been to other events around here, and it's going pretty strong.
I have a couple pictures I took when I was at the Heritage Celebration, and let's take a look at them and tell me what the blankets represent. Now, if you'll look at the screen here.
And so we'll go right to left. And so the very first one is my aunt, and then that's a bear. And then the next one is Robin Montoya. That is she's Haida, and that's a raven. And the next one, I believe, is my sister Shirley with her bear blanket on. And then Charlene, my girlfriend, and that has the sun on it. And that is the design of the Southern Winds dancers.
My daughter designed that herself.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's what you have on your shirt as well. Now, tell me about the hats.
The hats are cedar hats. So those were common way back in the day. They're dated older. You know, I couldn't even tell you how old, but they are a part of our regalia, our day-to-day life, because of as I said again, it rains so much there in southeast Alaska. So that's what the cedar hats are for. And then
it's very colorful, and the dances, you were in lines, it seemed like, right, Rose?
Yes.
That was really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the dances you were doing, how did you learn those?
We were very fortunate in life, and we have my grandma Esther Shea, and Esther Jackson's Shea is she went back to school in her late 70s and got her degree and started teaching her culture.
Good.
And it all started with one day, somebody asked her to, there was like a Native Day, Culture Day, and someone seen her and they said, hey, could you stop by the lower grades and come in and say a few things, the stories about your people. Mm-hmm. And it kind of caught her off guard, and went home and thought about it and thought, what do I say? And then she got it together and went in and seen how the kids reacted and realized that she needed to do something to try and save it. And so she started going through her mind, remembering when she was young and her aunts and uncles teaching her songs and dances of the old way. And then she started a dance group in Ketchikan, and then it grew, and then she would come down to California every so often, and then she started to show us. And then my uncles had a couple parties, naming parties, and so then we were dancing at the parties, and then unfortunately she passed away, and then it kind of slowed down. And then one day, 2 years ago, that's when we started the dance group. And so I asked the people on October 8th to have our first dance practice, and we've been going ever since. But my grandma, she's my grandmother's sister, so in our culture, she's on the same level as my grandmother. So she is addressed as grandmother. Huh? So my grandma Esther is, she's the one that kept me and the people in the lower 48 family, the ones taught us what we know today, and we learn every day.
That's wonderful
make
that
no
you kept,
mistake.
Kept it going and didn't just lose it, because so much of it is lost.
Yeah, and thank God for her. Yeah. I mean, I do. I appreciate everybody else, but it was really her that kept me going. She used to drag us to Canada. We'd go to Canada, she'd call and say it's time to dance, and we'd get in the vehicle, drive to BC, and then there we'd be dancing. And you know, at the time you're doing it, you're grumbling, well, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And today I'm crying because she's not here to do it with me. She's not here sitting with me today, is doing what I'm doing today, because that was really where she shined. She was really into our culture. So.
But it's your job to pass it on?
Yeah, I believe it is.
Educate others?
Yeah, I talked to my uncles and talked to them. I tried to get a hold of them a little while ago, but I told him last night I was going to do this, and he encouraged me to stay strong, speak about your people. So, yeah, I'm trying. And it is for me to say is that, I should have said it when we first started, but you get ahead of myself, is that, I apologize if I offend anyone or not say it correctly. And so I want to make sure you did say it was going up into Alaska. So I don't want my family to be, oh, your cousin said this. It's sometimes there's some things I do know, and there's some things that I'm wrong on. So I just want to say
do our best.
Yeah, I apologize for anything if I say that's incorrect. So. But I try my best to keep our culture alive.
Now tell me about the language. You said there's very few speakers left.
Very few. I belong to an organization here called the Tlingit Haida San Francisco, and then we go up to Juneau in March, and we speak about it, and they keep shouting out about our language, and sometimes we go to these other meetings, and people will stand up and say, hey, we got 500 speakers, 1,000 speakers, and we're down to, a handful, maybe 2 handfuls. And then there's a northern dialects and the southern dialects. And the southern dialects is more lacking than the northern dialects. And so we really don't have a whole lot of speakers. So, I only speak what I speak because I'm self-taught, through books and, and someone saying something to me. And, as we were out front, the young lady was saying her name, and it was something that came to me. Her name matched up kind of with, a phrase of Wasaway. And so there are some things that, that we kind of stay with, but there are some things that I couldn't walk through a forest and talk to you.
Well, you're doing great in carrying on the culture as much as you can and pass it on to the kids and make them listen.
Yeah.
But thank you both for being here, and thank you for coming to the American Indian Heritage Celebration here in Santa Clara County, because it's opened our eyes to something a little bit different. Not the norm that normally comes to our events here, but you know, we saw a different dance style, and that was beautiful to see. But thank you for being here, and
Thank you
have you back.
for
Thank
having
you
us.
guys, and
keep it up.
we
Keep up the
appreciate
good
it.
work. And thank you for joining us. Follow us on Facebook or like us on Facebook. But we'll see you next week. Native Voice TV. Good night.